When it comes to reviving all of humanity, I'm not sure that death is the right fit for the job. Sounds a bit like trying to cure cancer with a minigun to me. In today's humble opinion, we're proving that war sometimes changes in Darksiders II Deathinitive Edition. If I had to list the disappointments I've experienced in life, I'd rank Darksiders II Deathinitive Edition somewhere above waking up alone and somewhere beneath being born. The disappointment doesn't stem from the story or the mechanics that facilitate gameplay. Alright, so a little bit of it stems from the mechanics that facilitate gameplay. But it mostly comes from completely neglecting to respect the player's time and suffers from the negative friction that such a design philosophy brings itself, which works against any momentum it could hope to build. In order to understand what I mean, we have to talk about what the game does right, which there's actually a lot of. It opens with a horseback trek up a mountain to a giant ice fortress where a certain secret boy is hiding certain secrets. You must climb the castle, made perilous by the dilapidated architecture and swarms of frozen undead chomping at the bit to erase you from this world. It's an excellent tutorial level because it gives you a taste of what the core game mechanics, many of which are similar to action-adventure games with exploration elements, are. Its climax is an ice giant large enough that its title of mini-boss seems deceptive, followed by an actual boss fight with the bird-brain keeper of secrets disguised as your brother. Those two fights, of course, teach the player how to read telegraphs in order to be able to avoid incoming damage, and they serve their purpose wonderfully. You awaken in a new world, smash a few more baddies, and receive a quest that guides you to your main overworld hub. You meet a couple of interesting characters whose personalities are fleshed out, the sarcastic quips are on point, and the voice acting isn't dreadful. There are a couple of shops to familiarize yourself with, and a daunting challenge to test your mettle against. So far, everything's looking up. Then you leave the hub and arrive in the field you're going to be spending a good chunk of your time in, and everything goes downhill from there. They're large and empty, populated with a few of the lower leveled enemies and areas of vague interest. There's no real incentive to explore, and all of those cool mobility skills that our character has that would be perfect for exploration are left largely unused, save for a few uninspired ruin spelunkings. You're ushered along a predetermined path which further stifles player autonomy, and since these large open areas serve very little purpose beyond taking up space between areas of actual importance, they seem unnecessary at best and like an annoyance at worst. When everything before and after these sections is so fast and gratifying, from the way your character scales architecture to the smoothness with which he switches from light attacks to heavy attacks in the same chain, it makes hopping on your horse and occasionally pressing a button for a temporary speed boost seem like going out to a family dinner when your girlfriend's family, when you were promised an evening of staying inside, holding each other's hands and staring lovingly into each other's eyes. Normally a minor annoyance here or there wouldn't be too awful, but they've managed to develop an unfortunate chain of friction directly into the game. By prepping players to have a mindset for exploration with fun mechanics that could be used to traverse all sorts of obstacles in a vibrant, beautifully detailed world, they disappoint when there's nothing to reward that player's efforts when they actually do look around. This is made worse by the fact that a lot of things can't even be explored thanks to invisible walls. It makes those areas that you can access feel like that much more of a letdown when there's nothing there. Then there are areas in which the developers clearly want you to get something, but you can't figure out if you just don't have the skills to get it yet, or if you just aren't looking at the environment thoroughly enough. Eventually you say fuck it and move on. Gradually, through tiny mistakes like these, the game erodes away the player's curiosity and replaces it with a fuck it mentality, which ultimately will lead them to the decision on whether or not they want to continue playing it, and guess what a fuck it mentality produces in that situation. Now, it should be said that the horse sections aren't the only parts of the game. The actual dungeons illustrate the game at its best, with meaty combat, interesting weapon variety and itemization, and the occasional puzzle to keep the players on their toes. Problem is that those sections don't feel like the majority of the game, since there's so much filler in between them that ultimately doesn't contribute anything to it other than being pieces of eye candy depending on the environment. In more cases than not, they just seem to be added to remind you that your character is indeed one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And I know what you're thinking, wouldn't that be obvious enough if they just gave him a 6-piece revolver? And the answer is apparently no. We have to have the horse or the whole game falls to shit. Whatever would we do if he wasn't a literal horseman? Ultimately, I have to give Darksiders II Deathinitive Edition a 5 out of 10. I wish I could give it more than that just for the pun of its title alone, but I can't. Despite the fun and engaging gameplay it demonstrates throughout the combat and dungeons, there just isn't enough of it to warrant the gaping voids of nothingness that separate those areas of fun. It's just boring for a good portion of the game. It kindled the fire of my interest and then proceeded to douse it for the remainder of the time I spent playing it. I'd have much preferred they spent more time developing larger, more complex dungeons, or simply stripped the fields out altogether and made it a sequence of levels to play through without teasing the possibility of free roam. Sure, the game might have been shorter, but it would have been much stronger in terms of quality. Thank you everyone for watching, and special thanks to Gunfire Games, Vigil Games, and THQ Nordic for their efforts in developing Darksiders II Deathinitive Edition. I just like saying the title, honestly. There were a lot of good ideas present that I would have liked to see explored to their fullest. The horse segments really killed it. At the very least, you guys should have given Despair an infinite sprint button to hold down. but I know it's pretty old at this point, so I'll forgive you this time. Until next time, remember that failure is not the worst case scenario to go on with your bad selves, and stay awesome.